Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here, ready to take a trip down memory lane to look back at the career of yet another one of Street Fighter's famous combatants. At the dawn of the 90s, many of us remember our first magical experiences playing Street Fighter 2, a game that was like nothing that came before it, that would go on to be the blueprint which an entire genre would be built around. One of the many amazing aspects of the game was of course its large and diverse roster of fighters. Never before in my life had I played a game where I could choose between 8 different characters, but what proved to be even more fun was punching their lights out one by one. What surprised me as a kid was that after I had successfully run the gauntlet against these international foes, there were further opponents to try and take out. First I dealt with the boxer known as Balrog, who I do not recall being too much hassle for my 6-year-old self, but past this point I would get obliterated no matter how many times I tried on my first day of ever playing Super Nintendo. The warrior in question standing in my way was arguably more intimidating than any I'd faced off against prior. Of course, as the video title suggests, I am talking about Vega, a fighter whose sheer speed completely overwhelmed me as a youngster. Pair this with the fact he wears a horror film-esque mask and fights wielding a frickin' Wolverine claw, Vega seemed quite frankly terrifying. Keeping all of this in mind, I felt that today he would be the perfect candidate to go back and explore the career of, and take a look at every one of his major appearances in fighting games and other media to date. Is he as frightening as he appears on a surface level? Let's find out. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the mad story of Vega. Yeah! Obviously, our starting point with today's content is 1991, with the release of Street Fighter 2, a game where many well-known fighters would surface for the first time. Amongst these, Vega would of course be included, as one of the 4 Grandmasters, who make up the final 4 opponents in the game. Although it is of note that he too will become a selectable fighter, along with all the other Grandmasters as of Street Fighter 2 Champions Edition. Vega would be depicted as a mask-wearing, claw-wielding fighter from Spain who uses a personal fighting style combining Japanese ninjutsu and Spanish bullfighting, earning him the nickname of Spanish Ninja. Creative. As for his design, like the rest of the roster, he is a creation of Akira Yasuda. The character was partly inspired by a fighter named Geki from the 1987 Street Fighter game, a Japanese ninja who also fights with a claw. Vega's initial sketches simply depicted a masked man in a ripped shirt with long frizzy hair. At one point in development, Vega would be depicted wearing armour similar to a medieval knight, carrying a broadsword in tow, and there was a further concept of Vega depicted as a Spanish matador. The final finished design would encompass ideas from all of these concepts. Vega would retain the claw worn by Geki, he would wear armour in the form of his mask, drawing on the knight influence, and of course he would be a Spanish matador, giving us the Vega we all know and have been frustrated by. As discussed on here before though, Vega is not the name the fighter goes by in Japan, but instead Balrog. In Japan, Bison is known as Vega and Balrog is known as Bison. As mentioned on here previously, this was because Capcom were frightened of a lawsuit from the American boxer Mike Tyson, who the Japanese M. Bison in the game was clearly based around. But keeping this in mind, why not just switch 2 of the fighters' names around rather than 3? Well, the reason for doing a 3-way swap apparently comes down to the fact that Vega did not sound like the name for a final boss, according to Capcom's North American marketeers, whereas Bison sounded tougher to them. Keeping in mind Vega is a Spanish surname, giving that name to a matador made more sense anyway. As highlighted on here previously, to avoid confusion at international tournaments, these 3 fighters are referred to as Boxer, Dictator and Claw instead. Speaking of our claw-wielding maniac, in combat Vega uses this weapon to perform effective slashing attacks, but it is of note that Vega's claws are curved at their ends to prevent him from simply lethally stabbing his opponents. The claws do though give him additional range compared to most characters in the game. Vega is considered to be an obsessively narcissistic and vain individual. In fact, it is said that he considers himself the absolute epitome of beauty and perfection. It is due to these reasons that he chooses to wear an expressionless mask, so that his face is safe from any bruising or scarring that may be inflicted upon him during a fight. Speaking of the mask, he usually removes it after winning the battle, so it clearly has nothing to do with concealing his identity. Apart from being extremely proud of his looks, Vega sees himself as fantastic across the board. In fact, he is said to be so overconfident in his abilities that it borders on megalomania. Another character trait of note that Vega possesses is that he is incredibly sadistic and takes a sick pleasure in seeing the ugly murdered. So Vega offers a dangerous combination of character traits: narcissism, sadism, and disdain for anything or anyone he does not see as elegant. It is of note that out of everyone who appeared in Street Fighter 2, that Vega is the fastest and most agile, which would be why I had so much trouble with him back in the day. It is also worth stating though that despite this, he is actually one of the most delicate fighters who appears, trading his defense in favour of extreme speed. If not caught, Vega can overwhelm his opponents with quick lunges and a great keep away game, and his air maneuvers such as the flying Barcelona kick and sky high claw can be a nightmare for slower foe. Vega can get around his opponents performing many quick strikes in rapid succession, which paired with his amazing range can be devastating for his opposition. While this is the Vega we all encountered in Street Fighter 2, you may be wondering how he got to this point, so let's look further into his backstory. Vega was born in Spain into a very wealthy and privileged noble family. However, sadly for Vega, his family wealth and status deteriorated early on, resulting in his mother remarrying another man for financial security. What struck a chord with Vega early on was that this nobleman was not handsome like his own father, so this would result in Vega associating ugly people with negativity. This was impounded into his being further when his ugly stepfather murdered his beautiful mother. The childhood trauma would obviously warp a young Vega's mind, with him permanently looking at traditional beauty as good, and ugliness as an evil that needs to be purged from the world. In adult life, Vega would live as an honorary nobleman by day and a sadistic murderer by night, all spurred on from this childhood incident. Prior to this though, Vega would try to find solace. He would grow up doing a lot of hunting and would later transition to bullfighting, an obvious cultural tradition in his home land. Vega would channel his anger and take great pleasure in being able to take down his prey using his own might. But this was not enough for Vega, so he would move to Japan to study ninjutsu. Once in the East, Vega would pick up martial arts very quickly, which was made easy due to his already natural grace and agility. Having the unique combination of bullfighting and ninjutsu skills, Vega would transition into underground cage fighting, becoming one of the very best in the game. In Street Fighter 2, Vega is obviously one of the combatants in the Second World Warrior Tournament, a competition in which he has entered at the behest of Bison. Vega and Bison formed a simple professional relationship, with no friction between the two ever really occurring. Despite this though, Vega never really had much interest in helping Bison conquer the world, and was happy to revert to his usual lifestyle after the events of the game concluded. In the 1994 live action movie, Vega is played by Jay Tavar, and in the film is depicted working for Sagat as a champion underground cage fighter. Vega shows up wearing his trademark mask and claw, but sadly has very few lines. Eventually he is defeated in the movie by Ryu, and is left presumably to die in Bison's exploding base. The same depiction of Vega would obviously show up in the Street Fighter movie video games as well. In the Japanese animated movie that saw release the same year, Vega's appearance was arguably a little more noteworthy, due to the fact that he shows up in the movie's most memorable scene. In the film, he is sent by Bison to kill Chun-Li, and is almost successful in doing so. The reason why no one forgets this one is due to the fact that it occurs directly after the Chun-Li shower scene, leading to the half-naked woman fighting the masked warrior to the death. In this fight, while Vega has the advantage at first, he soon loses after flying into a rage after Chun-Li hit him in his beautiful face. The following year, he also showed up in Street Fighter 2 V, the anime based on the franchise. This time around, he is depicted as a bullfighter who tries to seduce Chun-Li. In this one, he becomes extremely jealous of Ryu and Ken's friendship with Chun-Li, so invites them to his noble castle so that he can fight the pair of gi-wearing martial artists in a cage match to the death. However, Ken is the only one that shows up, and he is successful in beating Vega in this brutal bout. Vega would not show up in another video game until the release of Street Fighter EX2, where he would enter the second EX tournament on behalf of Bison, curious to learn who was sponsoring it. Here he would encounter an ugly brute such as Crackerjack, but would find beauty in a match against Hokuto. Speaking of EX games, Vega would also appear in EX3, this time as Bison's tag team partner, where the pair enter to learn about Shadowgeist, a potential threat to Bison's life. In terms of Capcom produced fighting games, Vega would not resurface again until the release of Street Fighter Alpha 3. In part of his story, we have already covered it on this channel before, in my biopic video on Cammy. As covered previously, Cammy was a Shadaloo doll who went rogue, so Vega was tasked with bringing her in. Vega failed on his mission to do so, and eventually Cammy is successful in defeating Bison as well. But due to Cammy being previously brainwashed, she was still equipped with a trigger that was meant to kill her if she ever betrayed Bison. Due to this, she collapses when she defeats Bison, nearly burning to death in the Shadaloo base. This is prevented by Vega, who simply could not let someone as beautiful as Cammy die. Vega would also appear in Capcom vs SNK, SNK vs Capcom SVC Chaos, and Capcom vs SNK 2. Vega would appear in the Dreamcast game Cannon Spike as a darker version of himself called Fallen Balrog, the name Balrog being his original name in Japan. Vega would be a playable character in Street Fighter 4 games, with the events occurring after what went down in Street Fighter 2. In between the games, it is rumoured that Vega returned to his bullfighting, despite many also believing he was dead. In Street Fighter 4, a subdivision of Shadaloo known as Sin attempt to re-recruit Vega back to the organisation, which Vega happily accepts. This was due to being intrigued by their technology they were developing around creating new bodies for oneself. Vega saw this as an opportunity to be eternally young, thus preserving his beauty forever. In the events of the game, Vega steals valuable data for the project, but would learn Chun-Li did the same thing. Throughout the game, Vega is Vega and enjoys winding up Chun-Li. In Street Fighter 4, he says that Chun-Li has impressive beauty and strength and tries to play mind games with her by calling himself a ghost. He attempts to kill her after she steals the data, setting off the fire alarm which releases a toxic fire retardant. He escapes in a helicopter, witnessing Chun-Li being rescued also, meaning that he is not the only one who is successful in nicking the data. In the Street Fighter 4 series, when in combat, Vega has the ability to throw his claw off as a special taunt. In fact, he can also throw his mask in the game at a cost of 2 bars of super combo gauge. This allows Vega to increase his attack power by 25%, but the damage he can receive from oncoming attacks is also increased. By the time Street Fighter V came around, as a playable character, Vega evolved even further. For the first time in history, players could now access 2 very distinct fighting styles, allowing gamers to play as Vega either clawed or barehanded. On top of this, he can sheath or unsheath his claw at any point during battle. Barehanded, he can perform more grabs, whereas obviously with the claw he has more range. Basically, the 2 options allow gamers to choose between range or combo potential. It is also of note that he loses his mask when his HP is low. During this time, his attacks do slightly more damage as he enters this desperate state. In Street Fighter V's story, Vega's tale begins with him working at Shadaloo. Shadaloo are still using dolls for their missions, which reminds him of his encounters with Cammy. Eventually the 2 run into each other once again, where Vega taunts her for being obsessed over freeing the dolls. The 2 get into a fight and Vega wins, but lets Cammy go once again, claiming it is too soon to pluck her beauty. Soon Vega encounters a new character, Fang, at the Shadaloo Labs, who boasts the doll's power. But Vega disapproves of him abusing their beauty, causing the situation to become heated. The 2 trade blows but are interrupted by a soldier with a report that they have located Cammy, so Vega sets off to battle Cammy once more. Once Vega reaches Cammy, he ultimately lets her go again, but warns her of the dangers of attempting to save the dolls. Vega's story ends with him slashing 2 police officers outside a train station, continuing to think about Cammy as he fantasises about her loss and pain, leading to her true beauty blossoming. Away from the main Street Fighter canon, Vega would appear in Street Fighter Cross Tekken, which in his story explores his turbulent relationship with his tag team partner for the game, Balrog. 2 gentlemen who are like chalk and cheese, with neither liking each other, but the 2 continue to work together in a quest for Pandora's box. When completing the game with the pairing, the box's influence takes them over, causing them to attack one another. Amongst his many appearances, he would also show up in the mobile RPG known as Blood Brothers 2, and also in Street Fighter Cross Mega Man as a stage boss and as a class leader in Shadowverse. While over the years Vega's appearances have not been quite as prolific as some of the other Street Fighter roster members, his unique look and fast-paced fighting style is certainly something no gamer is ever going to forget. Pair all this with his tragic backstory involving his mother's murder, which led to his twisted worldview, Vega, the man who sees himself as a physical embodiment of male beauty, is quite frankly terrifying. So ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed today's episode looking back at the history of Vega. If you enjoyed this video and have not seen the others in the series, I will attach a Street Fighter character history playlist to the end of this video where you can access the history of Akuma amongst others. If you've seen most of my gaming content and want more historical biographical content, why not check out my new channel, Top Hat Wrestling Man, where this week we looked at the entire career of the vampire warrior Gangrel. Whether it be wrestling or more gaming content, I am sure I must have something that will tickle your fancy. Further to this, if you want to discuss the direction of the channel, I am live on twitch.tv/TopHatGameManLive from 8 PM BST every Tuesday and Saturday. And if you're really hardcore, you can additionally support the channel via Patreon to receive credits at the end of my videos, early access on content, and more. I have lots of options available on the table for you. Speaking of patrons, huge thank yous go out to Sebastian Velez, A Murder of Crows, Carl Johnson, Heo Paulo Lopez, Ben Harradine, Corey Imarsh Sr., Capcom vs SNK, BXL Gotham, Rowan Dinch, Evan Border, Philip Nanth, Azure Archive, Keith Ferguson, Joaquin Varela, Michael Cullix, Ago, Jordan Durant, Angel Light 85, Ian Boyle, Nick Daniels, Princess Zana, Daniel Daly, Computer Man, House of a Ted, ECU Professor, Gary Pinkett, Nostalgia Collector, Kid Anime, Justin Wang, Hermes Gonzalez, Instant Gratification Monkey, Man Shovel, James Bishop, JB, Michael Hall, Wesley Sang-hee, Wanker, Langston Miller, Noob, Brian Barry, Sarah Powell, Flaming Renee, Marvin Araliga, Chris Cool, TOG Driver, Adrian Hannington, Bernard NG, Richard Jude Stewart, Dan Van Damme, Lewis Viant, John Bates, David Bowell, Chris Fisk, Mike Bruno, Rick67, Antonio Rodriguez, Craig Jenkins, Retroverse.com, Casey Wright, Synth Spaces, Zai, Andrew Bazansky, Gunther Hendricks, and everybody else who chooses to back my work. Thank you very, very much. Yeah. Cheerio.